Welcome to our EDU324 International Dimensions video presentation, exploring the extent of which conflict has affected children's rights to education in Syria. Throughout this video, we'll be exploring pre-conflict Syria and present Syria. This video will be presented by Sam Anderson and Joe Cowlin.
Exploring education in pre-conflict Syria. Pre-conflict education in Syria poses a dominating force in the Middle East. However, this has not always been the case. Between the years of 1990 and 2000, education in Syria was very different. With the limited money available due to a restricted economy, the standard of education suffered. In this time period, education cost, and as a result became inaccessible for those families of a lower social class. In addition to this, during this period of time, the well-educated, often those of a higher social status, were guaranteed employment within the public sector, creating a larger gulf between the rich and the poor. In the year 2000, the Syrian government made schooling free and compulsory for all children and refugees up to the age of 15. By 2002, the government further increased expenditure on education by 600%, increasing resources and making it more accessible for all.
However, was this increase in funding working? Figures from 2010 showed that 98% of children in Syria were attending primary school. Also, during this time, Syria had one of the best achievement rates in the Middle East, with 90% of men and women attaining literacy grades. A report published by the Social and Economic Commission from Western Asia by the United Nations in 2017 further added to the positive effects of increasing children's rights to education. Furthermore, noticeable progress was being made in other fundamental areas of the country, with poverty being halved and food security increased among families regardless of wealth and social class. In addition to this, further progress was made towards the Millennium Development Goals set by United Nations in 2000. Education had been made accessible to everyone within the country, regardless of gender.
In 2011, following a series of political disputes, anti-government protests spread throughout the Middle East due to the low standards of living. In retaliation, the government used deadly force to crush the protests, resulting in civilians taking up arms. This was seen as an act of foreign terrorism, sparking rapid violence to sending the country into a civil war. The current death count stands at 367,965 people, with a further 192,000 people missing, presumed dead. 1 in 4 of these victims are believed to be children. As well as this high standing death count, 1.5 million people have been left with permanent disabilities. As a result of the war, children's access to education has been dramatically changed.
As a direct result of the conflict, half of the Syrian population has become displaced. This has affected the access that children have to schools. 1 in 4 of the schools have been damaged, destroyed, or are currently being used as a form of shelter from the conflict, leaving an estimated 2.1 million children out of school, having their right to education taken away from them. It has been said that the extreme and brutal violence has reversed more than 10 years of progress made in children's education, taking them back to a time where it was only available for those of wealth and power.
Schools are created to provide a safe environment for children to take part in effective learning. The current and ongoing conflict has severely damaged and is continuing to damage further the resources that are being provided to deliver education. This has impacted how parents feel about the current education system, with 1 in 3 choosing to leave the country as refugees for the sake of educating their children. Young children have become victims to the violence, making basic journeys to school an incredibly unsafe journey to make, leaving long-lasting, traumatizing damage. This traumatizing damage is causing children to not want to return to the school due to the lack of safety they feel after the horrendous and brutal sights they have seen. Resources have also tripled in price, isolating those that cannot afford the equipment offered from education. Furthermore, external aid practices are prioritizing the need for shelter, food, and water. As a result, education has taken a backseat. Without education, children are growing up without essential knowledge, resulting in a poor political, economical, and an unpeaceful society. Due to the effects on education and the lack of essential knowledge, children are then forced to become soldiers and are used as weapons in the conflict, taking away their childhood and putting them in a danger of becoming a victim of the civil war.
Fighting back for education, what is being done? A number of projects and organisations have been formed to help the current state of education within Syria. SOS Children is one of them organisations, and the focus is on helping schools by serving orphaned and disabled children. In 2013, 16,000 school bags were donated, also including stationery, to the children within Damascus. Before the start of the new academic year in mid-September 2018, SOS teams distributed 6,600 bags with stationery to the children that were struggling to afford to access education. The families of these children were also provided with food and essential household supplies to help the children through the winter. The School Box project was created to help provide mobile help for children that were suffering from trauma due to the conflict. It focuses on delivering art and play lessons, enriching and empowering the pupils to feel like they are children again. The Schoolbox project also allows the suffering children the chance to have access to support programs helping the vulnerable and the scared. Alternative classroom facilities have been created out of other old resources such as old buildings, tents and shipping containers to hold these lessons and give children their right to education back. All the classrooms are mobile, meaning that education can be provided around the country so that children do not have to miss out.
In contrast to education being delivered in classrooms, there are some cases in which education has to be taught in alternative provisions, such as in caves in the middle of conflict zones. As these alternative provisions are in places the government has lost the control of due to the war, the education that is being delivered there is not supported, leaving children helpless in the middle of the conflict. This shows the extreme lengths that children are willing to go to access education. The contents of the curriculum that is being taught is westernised and tailored to meet the needs of the pupils dealing with trauma and disabilities, making education more inclusive.
So, how has this conflict affected Syrian children's right to education? The extent of the damage caused by the conflict has catastrophically affected children's right to education within Syria, reversing the educational growth of the country by 10 years. 2.1 million Syrian children are currently out of education, and also 1 in 3 families have chosen to leave the country as refugees so their children can have the rights and access to education. Children's routes to school also come with danger, as many roads leading to their school is the epicenter of fighting, meaning they are more likely to get caught in crossfire than they are to reaching the school. Some schools have also been the focus of air attacks, leaving schools destroyed and many children dead.
But in the midst of all this despair, there is a shining light of hope provided by the many generous organisations that are trying to return the right of education to the children of Syria. Although there has been progress made to returning the right of education, there is still a long way to go to get the country back to the educational standards it once held amongst the Middle East. SOS Children and the Schoolbox project are fundamental in providing education for the children still situated in the conflict zones. With funding, they can still give an education to these children so that the society is not behind when the conflict finally comes to an end.
Thank you for listening. We hope that this video has given you a larger understanding of the problems Syria's education is facing in regards to children's humanity rights of access to education. Continued support from these organisations are the only way that the children are going to create a harmonious society for Syria in the future.